There are moments that arrive without announcing themselves. No particular fanfare, no sense of significance in the air. Just an ordinary set of circumstances that happen to be arranged, by whatever combination of chance and timing governs these things, in exactly the right order. For Nathan Briggs, that moment arrived on a Thursday afternoon in October, on a stretch of Route 9 that runs through the low hills east of Millbrook, in the middle of a rainstorm that had gone from light to serious in the time it took him to drive 4 miles. He almost didn't stop. He would think about that afterward. The almost. He had been running late, not dramatically late, but the specific kind of late that produces a low-level hum of tension, the kind that comes from too many things needing to happen in too small a window. His daughter Sophie had a school thing at 5:30, and it was already past 4, and he was still 20 minutes from home and still in the work clothes he'd need to change out of, and the rain was the kind that made everything take longer than it should. He saw the car from a distance. Black, low, pulled half off the shoulder with the hood up and the hazard lights doing their patient orange blinking in the gray afternoon. A Bentley, he registered, the way a man who has worked on cars his whole life registers the make and model of things automatically, without deciding to. He almost kept driving. Then he pulled over. Because that was who Nathan Briggs was, at 39 years old, after everything, a man who pulled over. His father had been that kind of man. His father's father before him. It was the kind of thing that gets passed down not through instruction but through example, accumulated over years of watching someone do the quiet right thing until the quiet right thing becomes simply what you do. He pulled the truck onto the shoulder ahead of the Bentley and sat for a moment with the rain hammering the roof, then got out. The woman standing beside the car was holding her phone in one hand and her jacket closed with the other, her dark hair already wet from the few minutes she'd been standing in it. She was perhaps 37, 38, and she had the kind of composed stillness that some people carry naturally and some people earn through long practice, the stillness of someone who is in a situation that is frustrating but who has decided, consciously or not, that frustration is not going to be useful here and has set it aside. She looked up when she heard him approach, and her expression did the thing that people's expressions do when a stranger walks toward them on an empty road in the rain, a rapid, instinctive assessment, the kind that happens in the first 2 seconds and determines everything that follows. Whatever she saw in Nathan's face, and Nathan had been told, occasionally and always with some surprise, that his face was a difficult one to distrust, she kept her posture open. "Broke down about 15 minutes ago," she said, without preamble. "Roadside assistance has a 2-hour wait. I have a meeting in the city at 6 that I genuinely cannot miss." "What happened?" Nathan asked. "It just stopped," she said. "I was driving and it stopped. I don't know engines." "May I?" He gestured toward the hood, which was already up, the rain falling into the open engine bay with complete indifference to the cost of what it was falling on. "Please," she said. Nathan leaned in. He had been a mechanic for 17 years. Not as a fallback, not as a second choice, as a genuine vocation, the way some people are genuinely called to the things they're best at, in the way that only makes sense from the inside. He had grown up in his uncle's shop in a small town in upstate New York, handing tools before he was tall enough to see over the hood of most vehicles, and the logic of engines, the clean causality of them, the way every effect had a traceable cause if you looked carefully enough and knew what you were looking for, had made sense to him in a way that not everything in his life had always made sense. He ran his own shop now. Briggs Automotive, on the edge of Millbrook, with 3 bays and 2 employees and a reputation that had taken 12 years to build and that rested, solidly and without gimmick, on the simple practice of telling people the truth about their vehicles and charging them fairly for the work. The Bentley's problem announced itself to him within 90 seconds. A failed fuel pressure sensor, causing the engine management system to cut fuel delivery as a protective measure. Not catastrophic. Not even particularly complicated, for someone who knew where to look and had the right tools, which Nathan kept in the bed of his truck with the organization of someone who has learned, over many years, that being prepared is not the same as being pessimistic. He straightened up, water running off his hair and down the back of his neck, and turned to the woman. "Fuel pressure sensor," he said. "Your car thought it was protecting itself. I can fix it, but I'll need about 20 minutes and I'm going to get considerably wetter than I already am." She looked at him for a moment. Rain was running down her face in rivulets and she made no move to wipe it away, which Nathan noticed without exactly deciding to notice it. "Can you actually fix it?" she said. Not skeptical. Just precise. The question of someone who wants accurate information rather than reassurance. "Yes," Nathan said. "Then please," she said. "And tell me what I owe you." "We can talk about that after," Nathan said, and went to get his tools. He worked in the rain for 23 minutes. Not 20, 23, because the sensor housing was corroded in a way that required patience rather than force, and Nathan Briggs had learned a long time ago that patience was almost always faster than force when it came to engines. He was soaked through within the first 5 minutes, his dark shirt heavy with water, his hands slick and careful on the tools. He worked with the focused, unhurried competence of someone who does not need to perform competence because they simply have it, and the woman stood near the back of the car, out of his way, and watched. She didn't watch in the way people sometimes watch when they have nothing else to do. She watched in the way of someone who is genuinely interested in what they're seeing, who is tracking the sequence of actions, making sense of the logic, the way an attentive person makes sense of any process they're observing carefully for the first time. Once she asked a question, "Is that the sensor housing or the sensor itself?" And it was a good question, a specific question, the question of someone who had been listening to what he said earlier rather than just waiting for him to finish. He answered it properly, the way he answered questions from customers who were genuinely trying to understand rather than just making conversation. She nodded and was quiet again. At the 23-minute mark, Nathan straightened up, reached into the car, and started the engine. It turned over on the first try, settled into the quiet, authoritative idle that Bentley engines produce, and stayed there. Nathan closed the hood, carefully, with both hands, the way you close the hood of a car that costs what this one cost. He turned around. The woman was smiling. Not a polite smile, not the performance of gratitude, a real one, the specific smile of someone whose 6 o'clock meeting had just become possible again. "You actually fixed it," she said. "I said I could," Nathan said. "People say a lot of things," she said. "You did it." Her name was Victoria Strand. She told him this when she asked his name, the natural exchange of two people who have shared 23 minutes of rain and a problem solved. She said it the way people say their names when they're not thinking about what the name might mean to the person they're telling, plainly, without the slight adjustment of presentation that people sometimes make when they expect recognition. Nathan didn't recognize it. He knew cars, not finance, and the name Strand Capital would not have meant anything to him even if he'd heard it, which he hadn't. What he knew was that she was direct and specific and had asked a good question about sensor housings, and that she was standing in the rain on Route 9 trying to make a 6 o'clock meeting that mattered to her. He gave her his name. She shook his hand, which was still damp and somewhat greasy, without any visible concern about either. "What do I owe you?" she asked again. Nathan considered. "Parts and labor, I'd normally say. But I don't have a receipt book in the truck and your car needs a proper sensor replacement done in a shop. What I did will get you to the city and back, but it needs a permanent fix within the next few days." He paused. "Bring it to Briggs Automotive in Millbrook and we'll settle it then." Victoria looked at him with the evaluating attention she'd been using throughout. "And if I don't bring it in?" "Then you don't," Nathan said. "But the car will need the work regardless, so it's in your interest." Something shifted in her expression. Not visibly, exactly. More like a change in quality, the way light changes when a cloud moves. "You stopped in the rain on an empty road for a stranger," she said. "You spent 23 minutes getting soaked to fix an expensive car that doesn't belong to you. And your concern is that I might not follow through on paying you." Nathan looked at her. "I didn't stop because of the car," he said. I stopped because you were standing next to it. A pause. The rain kept falling, lighter now, the storm beginning to make its way east. I need to get to my meeting, Victoria said. You should go, Nathan said. She opened the car door. Then she stopped, one hand on the roof, and looked back at him standing in the rain with his wet shirt and his toolbox and his truck pulled up on the shoulder ahead of her car. I want to see you again, she said. Simply. Without performance. The statement of someone who has decided something and sees no useful reason to be indirect about it. Nathan was quiet for a moment. The rain moved through the trees along the road with the sound rain makes when it's easing, softer, less urgent, the sound of something almost done. Bring the car in, he said. We'll go from there. Nathan stood on the shoulder of Route 9 for a moment, rain dripping from his hair, toolbox in hand, watching the Bentley's taillights disappear around the curve. Then he got in his truck and drove home to change his clothes before Sophie's school thing, which he was now, somehow, going to make on time. Sophie was 9 years old and had her father's dark eyes and her mother's way of asking questions that went directly to the point. She had been born into a family of 3 and had grown up in a family of 2, since her mother had left when Sophie was 4, not dramatically, not cruelly, just with the quiet certainty of someone who had realized, too late for everyone, that the life she was in was not the life she was meant for. Nathan had never spoken of this to Sophie with bitterness, because Sophie did not deserve to inherit her father's grief, and because Nathan's grief about it had, over 5 years, largely composted itself into something useful, a kind of clear-eyed knowledge about what he wanted and what he didn't, and a patience about the difference. Sophie knew about the broken-down Bentley because Nathan told her about it over dinner, the way he told her most things, directly, as a story, with the details that mattered and without the ones that didn't. She listened with her fork halfway to her mouth, in the attentive way she had. Did she say thank you? Sophie asked. She did, Nathan said. Did she pay you? She's going to bring the car in. Sophie ate a bite of her dinner. Considered. Do you think she will? Nathan thought about Victoria Strand's face when she said I want to see you again. The directness of it. The absence of any gap between what she meant and what she said. Yes, he said. I think she will. Sophie nodded, satisfied, and returned to her dinner with the air of someone whose question has been answered to her satisfaction. The Bentley came in on Saturday morning. Nathan was in the first bay when he heard it pull into the lot, the engine running with the slight roughness of the temporary fix, and he came out wiping his hands on a shop rag to find Victoria Strand standing beside it in jeans and a leather jacket, looking entirely different from the composed woman in the white blouse on the highway and entirely the same in the ways that mattered. The 6 o'clock meeting, Nathan said. How did it go? Very well, she said. Because I made it. She looked at him with that evaluating quality, calmer now, unrushed. How's your daughter? Nathan paused. He hadn't mentioned Sophie on the highway. I looked you up, Victoria said. Not apologetically. Just accurately. Briggs Automotive. You've been in Millbrook for 12 years. One daughter, Sophie, 9 years old. Your shop has a 4.9 rating on every platform that rates things, which I have learned, in my professional life, is nearly impossible to sustain and mean something real about how you operate. Nathan looked at her for a moment. And I do my research, she said. On things that matter to me. The Saturday morning light was doing what October light does when it's making an effort, coming in low and warm across the lot, catching the dew on the cars in the overflow spaces, making everything look like it was worth paying attention to. Come inside, Nathan said. I'll make coffee while the car's on the lift. It's going to take about an hour. I have the morning, Victoria said. She followed him inside, and the shop smelled of oil and coffee and the particular clean smell of well-kept tools, and she sat at the small table near the window where Sophie did her homework on late nights, and Nathan made coffee, and they talked for an hour while the Bentley was properly repaired and the rain from Thursday dried off the windows in the October sun. Sophie came by at noon, on her bike, in the way she did on Saturdays when she wanted to see what was happening at the shop. She came through the side door, stopped when she saw the visitor, and looked at Victoria with the direct assessment of a 9-year-old who has grown up around people who say what they mean. "Are you the Bentley lady?" she asked. "I am," Victoria said. Sophie nodded slowly, with the air of someone confirming a hypothesis. Then she looked at her father with an expression that was, Nathan thought, rather too knowing for a 9-year-old, and went to see what was in the mini fridge. Victoria looked at Nathan. Nathan looked at Victoria. Something quiet and warm passed between them in the Saturday morning light of a garage that smelled of coffee and good work, something that didn't need to be named yet to be real. Some things begin with grand gestures, with declared intentions and carefully planned moments. And some things begin on the shoulder of Route 9 in the rain, with a man who pulls over because that is simply who he is, and a woman who notices exactly who that is, and a car that needed fixing and got fixed, and two people standing in the aftermath of an ordinary act of decency, finding that the distance between them had, somehow, become very small. Nathan Briggs had almost not stopped. He thought about that sometimes, in the months that followed, and felt the particular gratitude of someone who did the thing they almost didn't do, and found on the other side of it something they hadn't known they were looking for. The almost. Thank God for the almost.